So, Rebecca, 15 minutes ago, I was still sleeping. And
You never call me, so when I was like sitting outside your house and I saw you calling me, I was like, what is going on here?
yeah, I woke up and I lazily looked at the clock and realized that we were podcasting in 5 minutes. And I called you and told you to give me another 15, but I only needed another 5, really. And
very impressive.
Here
you
we are
wearing a hat.
Well, it's for your sake that I'm wearing this hat, but let's get into it. This email is from an anonymous patron. She says, I'm a longtime listener, but this is my first time emailing in. Here's my question. How do I stop being bothered by my husband's trauma responses at Christmas? Mm-hmm. I have always loved Christmas, and even though I have been through a lot of trauma in childhood, my love for Christmas has been unwavering. My husband, however, also experienced childhood trauma, and Christmas is very hard for him. My husband seems very grumpy, irritable, sulky, and rude on Christmas. While I know in my mind that this is stemming from his pain, it almost ruins the holiday for me. I end up being the fun one on Christmas and the only person making the day cheerful at all. My husband and his family like that about me. They have told me this explicitly, but I feel as though they benefit greatly by me bringing them up in mood while they are bringing me down. I feel so bad, but I am becoming resentful toward my husband for his attitude on Christmas. I'm guessing it is because I haven't seen others model grace and acceptance of grumpiness and being down. Sorry. I see. I'm guessing it's because I haven't seen others model, like my parents, how to be cool around people that are grumpy. Can you please help model this for me? I think I am being unreasonable, but I truly can't tell. End of email, smiley face. Rebecca. And for context, you're Jewish, and your birthday is on Christmas.
And I'm very grumpy on Christmas. So you sent me a huge list of questions, and I was like, please, let's do this one first, because I feel like of anyone, I have a special view to answer this one. So first off, I always say Christmas is not compulsory, and that is really hard for the average American to understand, that you would not enjoy it, that it would not bring you joy, that you can't just get swept up in the Christmas spirit. That's actually okay.
Like, when would you run into it? I imagine at work there would be like Secret Santa. That would get annoying. But
well, actually, for me, it's Christmas. Christmas music sends me over the edge. There's a point where I stop leaving the house. And then back when you used to listen to the radio, it would become more and more Christmas music until Christmas Day. It was only Christmas music.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay with that on Halloween, but don't get me wrong. Certain holidays, it's okay.
Christmas music on Halloween? That's weird.
No.
Oh.
Halloween music on Halloween. Like KEXP in particular does a great Halloween day where it's just all creepy music all day. But so, if you're not into Christmas, you've been stuck with probably 2 months of the lead up. So you're already really grumpy day of. And so I would say to our listener, what are things that you can do to carve out that it's special? You don't need to cheer your husband. It's husband. Mm-hmm. You don't need to cheer your husband up. He doesn't need to have the same experience that you're having. He's allowed to not find joy in any of this, because if Christmas is loaded for you, it is so awful. There are so many reminders that your family didn't or doesn't show up for you. Huge triggers of, not having enough money, or enormous family expectations of that on that day that you're supposed to perform all day as something that, you're not and you don't believe in. So just know that I would say, as I would hope, just think of it this way, as easy and as joyful as it is for you, he experiences none of those things, and that's completely valid.
Yeah. Yeah. An anonymous patron is essentially agreeing with that and thinking that because of her efforts to get them to be happy or to create a family experience, she is starting to resent them, and it's kind of ruining Christmas for her. And so what I would add to that is that, this is kind of a long shot, but I might go to him and say, this is, how you feel. And, you're saying, hey, if you don't like Christmas, then that's totally fine, of course. But is there a way that we can create like a new tradition or something,
Right. That's what I was going to say too. It's like, what is Christmas really about? Is it about love? Is it about family? Is it about light in the darkness? Is it about a fat man? Is it about the birth of your Lord? Like, what if it's truly about?
Is it about maybe you create like a whole new, like, it's possible that.
I mean, this is why there's Festivus, right? Like,
yeah, it's also possible that, or like my Jewish friends would have a party called Quanchonimus, and it's possible that there's a new version. Like if you said, hey, if you, husband, could create your own Decemberus, what would that be like? Maybe there's an answer. Maybe for him it's like, oh, well, I've always wanted to do that thing where you go to the woods and you chop down a tree and then you can, or I've always wanted to make it this or that, or I don't want any music, but I like the food or whatever, maybe there's put him behind the wheel kind of a thing.
Because I actually like the nighttime light displays. Like last year I went to the zoo and that was so much fun. Or there's certain famous neighborhoods in Seattle like Candy Cane Lane where it like I actually enjoy that part and I will go and do that part. But there's a whole other part of it that I don't want to participate in.
Yeah. So there's that. There's also just having a separate experience for yourself, which sucks because I can relate to Anonymous Patron in that for me, Christmas is universal. I didn't grow up in a rough household, and Christmases were a wonderful time of year, as Andy Williams would sing. The music, the Christmas tree, the ornaments, the presents.
I remember
Santa.
we found some Christmas album at a estate sale, and you were like, "This is the one."
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was.
Oh, it was probably a compilation of Johnny Mathis and Barbra Streisand and Bing Crosby.
Like 70s Christmas or something.
Like 60s, 70s. Yeah. One that I think every WASPy household had, right? And so I'm a WASP, right? In a sense? Half
Yes.
half white?
Half.
I'm a WASP. What is WASP? White
Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Yeah, that's me. I mean, that's my mom. So that's for me. So if my wife wasn't into Christmas, then it would bum me out. I think I would spend a lot more time with my family. So I don't know if Anonymous Patron can do that, like spend Christmas with people that dig it. Maybe your husband would be hurt by that. So I don't know. There's no good answer because, like I said, Christmas is about togetherness and family and building traditions. And, I just can't really describe the way that Christmas feels. And my wife had a nice childhood too and good Christmas times. So there's just like an electricity in the air on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the way things smell, the way things feel, the way eye contact feels different. I don't know. It's weird. It's everything's elevated. And if I had a partner that was grumpy and hated the whole thing, it'd be a bummer.
But so last year I finally got to do what I have always wanted, which is to have a non-denominational movie party on my birthday. Food. People brought food all day. People arrived in their pajamas. We watched not Christmas movies. And it was so great. And so many people have said to me afterwards, you know what, I'm so bummed I didn't come over to your house and just watch movies with you. Next year, I'm telling my family, like, they get the morning for the Christmas craziness, and then I'm coming over to your house to watch movies because that's the vibe that I want. It's my day off. Like, I don't want to perform. I don't want to have to get dressed up. And I thought, this is so funny. Like, I'm finally getting what I want. And it's all these other people are like, you know what? I want that too on that day.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah. So I think you can, find your people on that day for sure.
And just, it's okay to have grief about it, right? I mean, all of us in partnerships are like, there's just this one thing that I want from my partner. And most of the time you don't get that one thing, or there's something else. It would mean so much to me if we had the same hobby, or if we like the same music, or if you would just go out to sushi with me, or, there's always a thing.
Yeah. Anonymous Station specifically asked us to model, and I guess the only thing I'll say along those lines is that I guess the easiest road to take would be that maybe you tell your husband, I'm trying to approach Christmas different this year so that it is good for me and good for you, as optimal as possible. And so that means that I'm going to be doing a lot of things on my own or with other people. If that hurts your feelings, let me know, because I can adjust. But I want it to be special for me, and I know that it's hard for you, which I get. I totally understand it. But is that okay with you? That I don't know. I don't know how he'd feel about that. I think it'd be a dick move if he was like, no, you can't have a good time on Christmas.
Yeah. I mean, I think another thing to model is to acknowledge what you're grumpy about. So often we see our partners and it's like, only they have faults. But if you can say, what I'm grumpy about is like, I hate the family reunions that you love, or I hate game night with your friends and how loud it is and how they take over the house, to just admit that there are things that you are also really grumpy about. Mm-hmm. Because grumpiness it's normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Grumpiness is just not liking the situation. It's your body telling you don't like it. Another email, patron Laura from Germany. These are all kind of trauma-related emails. She says, can you give some insight on how body memory works when it comes to trauma? What makes these feelings stored in specific physical areas? How can someone deal with it? For background, I get triggered really badly if anyone touches my arms, back, shoulder, neck because of childhood trauma and physical abuse. I can't even touch myself in the neck without being extremely uncomfortable. Greetings from Germany. I love your content. Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, so there is so much research on how we hold trauma in our bodies. And if we think about it, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean, it kind of, in Western culture, we think about trauma as a brain experience, but actually the brain is only one factor. So I am trained in sensory motor psychotherapy, level 2. This is the work of Pat Ogden and Dr. Janina Fisher, and Dr. Pat Ogden, I should say. And what happens is that we perceive things on many levels. So if we talk about 5 sense perception, we perceive things through touch, through smell, through sight, through hearing, through taste. And all of these factors, all of these places in our body have their own experience of the trauma. So like for me, one of my earliest traumatic experiences was being in a car accident in a 1970s car seat that was just like a metal rack. And it fell forward and I hit my clavicle bone and broke my clavicle bone. But my mom had a concussion and didn't know that my clavicle bone was broken. And so I walked around for 24 hours with a broken clavicle bone until I picked up the cat and my shoulder separated. And I have that as a body memory, right? Like I see it in my brain and I can kind of talk about it. But when I talk about it, there's actually a bump. I feel it in my body because, of course, our bodies store memories, right? Our bodies store all kinds of good memories. Like if you watch the Olympics, you saw these people who were able to do these amazing feats because their bodies do this action over and over and over again. That's how they train their bodies. And trauma is very similar. But also what's happening is that in a traumatic experience is that different hormones are released into your brain. That memory track is set down deeper than like how you wash the dishes. And so it stays in a different way, both in your body and your brain. Mm-hmm. than it does kind of an average experience. So the way that people heal from body-based trauma is there's tons of work out there, but a lot of mindfulness practices are based on breathing and relaxing and allowing the body to tell its own version of the story, allowing the body to move through that experience. There's often in sensory motor this idea that there was a unfulfilled action. So like if all of your memories are in your back body, I would imagine we would do a lot of work of thinking about protecting your back body. What would it be like to protect your back body? But it's different for every person. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm getting anywhere.
No, it's great. Okay. With your clients, you will do body awareness regarding trauma to help heal.
Yes. So you're working very slowly, and there is no agenda to get anywhere.
Okay.
And there's no agenda to tell the trauma story either. So an example.
You say that because people will go too fast.
Yes. So I'll give an example. A client of mine was threatened with death in the workplace, was a death threat. She left that job, or she took a leave of absence. She came to me. This was like 5 years ago. I had to inform her that like chances with her presentation, chances of her going back to that job were very, very slim. At the time, she kind of laughed me off. We've done tons of work. Just recently, she went back to the site just to see it. And the first thing I said to her was, when did your body get jacked up? And she was like, oh, at the freeway exit. I could feel myself tensing and not breathing. And, we've done so much work. And I was like, you were so brave to go back. And why did you do that? And she said that people at that job site wanted to see her again. And it was just a really interesting story. But her body had its whole own reaction.
Yeah.
That began long before she got to the location. And then people at the job were like so sad that she wasn't, quote, over it and like wasn't coming back, but all of these really scary experiences are still stored in her body. Mm-hmm. And those other people don't understand that she had a life or death experience at that place. Mm. And that, as much work as we have done, that location is still unsafe for her. And so, but it was like, that's like 5 years of work just to get her.
Describe the work. Do you focus on body parts?
Yes. So, so often what clients will say is, I feel really tight in my chest just talking about this. And so we'll do a lot of breath work there. I'll often have people put a hand on it, and I will mirror them putting a hand on their chest. And we'll take lots of breaths, and I'll say, does that part of your body have anything it wants to say? So instead of speaking from the head, people often kind of sit and think and say, oh, wow, I'm really scared. It's like much more tense than I realized. And we'll do more breathing there. And then in sensory motor, you ask, is this a thought, a memory, or a body sensation? Like we're just splitting it up even more. And so there's kind of lots of roads that you go down. There's no right or wrong answer. And people will often say, like, that's enough for today. And we'll stop right then. Mm-hmm. And we'll start doing reparative work, getting recentered again. And then that work is, how do you know that you're safe in this room right now? And so people, and I'll go through 5 sense perception then. What do you hear that tells you that you're safe in this room right now? What do you smell? And often like Mochi's on their lap, or, so they'll say like, I feel the dog, or what do you hear? Smell is so crucial in these memories too. Often it's an olfactory experience. Mm. Certain smells will set people off.
So the idea is with awareness, compassion, self-compassion, and expression and feeling and allowing oneself to feel, taking care of oneself as you go down that road, healing occurs and recovery occurs.
Yeah. And I just did my vicarious trauma workshop, and as the final thing that we do in that is I share this clip of Sylvia Bornstein, a meditation teacher at Spirit Rock in Northern California. She has this meditation that she does where she says, the person most worthy of your love is you. And when I do that work in person, people like get in arguments with me and like it's really fun. But I was saying that to my client the other day as I talked about this story. She told me this story and I was just like, you are most worthy of your love, and the way you took care of yourself in the last 5 years and the way you took care of yourself going back and not performing for your friends and being like, this is great. Thanks so much. I love it here. I love what you've done. But to say like, I feel very uncomfortable. I'm going to go now. Thank you for inviting me back. That to be honest and caring with yourself in the moment, that is self-love, and that is like the greatest form of healing. The other really funny thing my client said to me was, the problem is now I see bullshit everywhere. And I'm like, yes, that is the problem in healing. It's that you see how much people are on autopilot, how much people are masking. When you're unwilling to mask, you're like, oh. Part of how a lot of people are getting through is they're not in touch with their emotions in the moment. So yeah, I would say to this listener, if you can find a somatic-based therapist, or if you can find a body worker who's willing to kind of go really slow and, center on your front body and slowly, so the thing is like, when we say like, I don't feel comfortable doing that, often it's like, oh, but you could touch my right shoulder, or I could touch my right shoulder. And like, we would just explore how far down could you go? Oh, I could go kind of, I could reach kind of back, but then I need to stop. Okay. How do you know that? Well, my stomach starts to clench. You're going super slow. Mm-hmm. And just kind of exploring where the edges are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because...
Well, people deserve to reclaim their body.
Yeah.
When you were abused, Laura, you had territory in your body taken away from you in the moment, and it's still not yours yet. And you deserve that. It takes time. You got to get back there, and to some extent, no pain, no gain. You don't want to just jump into the deep end. That will traumatize you, but guided trauma work, it's not pleasant all the time.
Yeah. And when Janina was training us, she said, I do this work 30% of the time. It's not always right. Like, so many things have to go right to have someone be able to do a trauma, a body-based trauma session that addresses the exact trauma, not just kind of a general.
Well, I would say trauma experts that don't advertise as somatic therapists also understand how to do this kind of work. They don't necessarily emphasize body work, but if they know anything about emotions in the body and memories, they know about all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And especially if you said it up front, they would, I guess that would be a good litmus test, mm-hmm. Because trying to find a somatic therapist might be harder than finding a trauma specialist. So if you found somatic people but even if you found a somatic person, you wouldn't know if they really understood trauma well enough.
Also, if you're in Germany, one of my favorite trauma treatments is really common there, which is I think it's called the Hematic clay field, where it's like Sandtray therapy, but it's a box full of clay, and you can get it wetter or drier and kind of like get into it. And it's this really physical, kind of amazing experience. Huh. And it's really effective for processing trauma.
Interesting.
Much like Sandtray.
So the other thing I'll add to all that, which is wonderful, Rebecca, is that, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, when I would hear people talk about somatic work and memories being in the body, the little bit that I was exposed to sounded pseudoscientific to me, where people would almost be saying, or even flat out saying, that there were literal, almost like spirits in the body or something. Mm. And, if that's your belief system, fine. But it didn't resonate with me. But then about 19 years ago or whatever. It was a long time ago. I remember I was sitting in a parking lot at Bellevue Square, and I was listening to an interview or some podcast, and someone was talking about consciousness, and then I understood. And this will be a butchering of it to some extent because it's actually pretty complicated science. But, as you said, we tend to think of our souls or our minds or our memories or ourselves as being contained within the brain. And if you just took our brain out and put it in another body, it would still be us. Or if you took our brain out and put it in a jar, like on Futurama, you could talk to us. Or that Steve Martin movie that I loved when I was like 12 years old. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, All of Me.
Was it All of Me?
Mm-hmm. It's one of the greatest. Have you watched it? It holds up so well.
It does. Isn't Kathleen Turner?
No, it's Lily Tomlin.
Oh, Lily Tomlin. Okay. So, I'll have to rewatch it.
We should watch it together.
Okay. As Steve Martin at his prime, really.
It's some of the best physical comedy you've ever seen in your life.
I have this vision in my head of him like walking down the street, and his body isn't quite working. And anyway, so, we tend to think of ourselves as being completely contained within the brain. And a large part of ourself is contained within the brain. But the science is that we can't understand the world and ourselves without the brain body, not only just the brain body, but also the brain body environment connection. Because, to even zoom out a little farther, if we go, okay, well, then the self is at least completely contained within the body, right? But then they do experiments, and you also look at different phenomena. Like if you put someone in a sensory deprivation chamber, eventually they lose themselves. They start hallucinating. Mm-hmm. You start, completely disconnecting from reality and from consciousness. So it's the self is not only in the brain, it's not only in the body, but it's everywhere. Not that it's a spiritual thing, but if you choose to see it that way, but what resonates with me is that we never evolved as a self, not in a body and not in a world, right? So
we are truly products of our environment.
Yeah. So we and along these lines, memory and emotions are, like when they say stored in the body, that's a blunt way of putting it. But the way that I think about it is that once I understood the research and the physiology around emotion, because that was another thing I thought, that emotion was, it's in the limbic system, right? Mm-hmm. In, the inner brain. But that's a way oversimplification.
Right. I mean, there's also the ventral vagal nerve running all the way through the body and
Yeah. Well, literally every nerve in your body. I mean, like the way that emotions work when they actually, and it's hard to study this precisely because we don't have machines to measure this precisely, but when there's models of emotion theory that says that we perceive something, like say fear. That's an easy one to do. We see a tiger that is stalking us, and before we even register it in our prefrontal cortex as danger, it bypasses all of that conscious mind and shoots to our arms and legs and our stomach and our heart and adrenaline. Let's go, right? So fight or flight. Then our limbic system and then eventually our prefrontal cortex,
if we're lucky, our prefrontal cortex
notices that our body is feeling something. Mm-hmm. We tend to say, I saw a tiger and I felt scared because tigers are scary. But if you look at the steps, how fast things are going, there's no way your limbic system and your prefrontal cortex has time to pick up on that. And so, but even with like love, right? When you are, say, cuddling with a loved one, your body is feeling something, and then your limbic system and eventually your prefrontal cortex notices the relaxation feeling throughout your body, or the sensation, and so so like when you're remembering what it feels like to love someone, your body will manifest, and this is all study, this isn't magic thinking, your body will manifest the feeling that you get when you are in contact with that person. So if you cut yourself off, as some people do from suppression or from injury, from your body in certain ways, then it's hard to feel love. Similarly, like when they do Botox for people, they found that not only do they look like they have blunted emotions because their face is been made numb, right? Their muscles no longer are working in certain areas, but they literally don't feel the emotions. So you take Botox, which it just temporarily numbs or deadens the nervous system and the muscles so that it doesn't move, so that it smooths out the skin. And when they ask people to subjectively or have reactivity that is indicative of emotions, they have lesser emotions. So where are the emotions? Where is the self? It's in the muscles in the face. It's outside of the brain because our emotions are the whole experience. One could argue that emotions begin, emotions depend on perception, which can come from within. But, so if it's a perception of a memory or perception from the outside inward, it goes straight to the body, and then our brain notices. Now, other theorists will say it happens all at the same time, or our limbic system engages, and then our body, and then our brain again. But there's, viable models that say perception, body, then we feel the emotion. So our bodies are, and then when we remember those experiences and the emotions, again, the body is involved.
Well, and another version of that is how many clients have come to me referred, their ER doctor has said they go to the ER because they think they're having a heart attack. And the ER doctor says, you're not having a heart attack, you're having an anxiety attack. What stresses do you have in your life? Do you have a mental health counselor? And then they end up in my office. So it's in reverse, right? Their body is completely flooded. They think they're going to die. Yeah. They're sure they're going to die.
Yeah.
But it's a body reaction to emotion, and their head is probably having anxious thoughts, but the body reaction is so intense. And, they would never think to talk about this with a professional, or that would be, whatever hangups they have around therapy, they haven't been to therapy first. But it is a medical doctor who says to them, you're going to have to talk this out.
Hopefully. A lot of medical doctors fail to do that. I think heart doctors are routinely, I think I asked a doctor one time, but I think most of their heart patients are likely having anxiety. Another well understood, well documented physical manifestation of psychological pain and anxiety and distress is back pain.
Right.
Lower back pain. Not to discount people's lower back pain. It fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But
it is often a somatic response.
Right. One of the best avenues you can go down as an hypothesis as to why you have back pain, and the solution too, is to evaluate your emotional stress, your life stress, your social stress, your relationships. It's not necessarily the reason. You could literally just have something wrong with your lower back, but functionally wrong. IBS is another potential.
Stomach aches. Often people, I'll say, where do you feel it in your body? And they'll say, I feel it in the stomach, and the stomach has as many nerve endings as the brain. They call it the second brain. Like it feels things just as much. And in my family, everybody had ulcers in the 50s and the 60s, I'm sure, because nobody could talk about anything. Or for me, my current somatic response is I will lose my voice. My throat closes up and I suddenly can't speak. And I have to take a minute, get it together.
Where did that start?
I'm sure it's from my childhood.
But you don't have a direct experiencer.
But, talking, they say this with babies, right? That babies cry and cry and cry, and eventually they stop crying. And I think that, I tried to speak up and say something, and eventually I got voiceless, which is quite dramatic. If you know me, I can, talk quite strongly, talk about issues that other people can't talk about. But imagine me kind of freezing up and losing my voice. That happens to me from time to time.
Like in what scenarios?
Like in really sad scenarios, or when I have something really hard that I have to tell someone that's close to me, not in a therapeutic setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I lose my voice.
Like when you're hurt?
More when I'm sad or overwhelmed. I mean, it's definitely a regression response, right? Like I'm not fully an adult.
What does it feel like in your throat?
It's awful. It's like I can feel it coming, and I try and get sound out, and it doesn't really come out.
Really? Mm-hmm. Like your diaphragm or your larynx or your throat muscles or your...
I think probably my throat closes up. I mean, I've heard this from a lot of trauma survivors, and I'm flashing in my head. So in my book, Square the Circle, I have all these body-based coloring sheets, because if you say to someone like, what are you feeling in your throat? Can you draw me a picture of that?
It must be like your 12th anniversary of this book.
Yes.
Or I mean, how many years have you been?
Oh my God. I don't know, but I still do them with people all the time.
So it's on Amazon, Square the Circle.
It's on Amazon. If you want body-based coloring sheets, chakra-based coloring sheets, they're all there. But, I have a throat. I have a throat. I have a stomach. I have a brain. I have a heart. I have a pelvis. I have all of the ones where people hold this crap because I saw it so much. So the throat ones are really similar. People tend to have like a constricting there and exploding there, and that is very common to what I probably am experiencing in that moment. I just lose my voice.
People will say, as a metaphor, I'm holding that trauma in my throat, right? Mm-hmm. Another way of putting it is your whole body is holding all your memories. You can't have memories, especially with emotion, without your body being involved. All these imperceptible little sensations when you feel love or hurt, or hurt's an easy one because so often you will feel a pain in your heart or your stomach or something. Like that's why we call it like a broken heart or a punch in the gut, because we do feel it that way, because we evolved, I believe, to co-opt physical sensations to motivate us through emotion. Like when we were pre-emotional, pre-social creatures, if something punched us in the gut, we would feel pain, and then we would try to change our scenario so we don't have that pain anymore, get away from the pain. As we evolved into social and emotional creatures, we co-opted slowly these nerve sensations to get us to change our behavior. So if someone hurt our feelings, our bodies didn't invent a new emotion, really. It just said, well, we already have this hurt feeling that motivates you, so let's just use that, and we'll use that punch in the gut feeling or that heart being stabbed or something. And then that'll alert your limbic system that something's wrong, something has to change. And then that motivates you to change your social situation, because for us as social creatures, without acceptance and togetherness, we would be left in the cold and starve or be predated upon and eaten. So,
well, and there's different myths through time. Like I'm living this podcast, not only The Tudors, which is all about ancient history, and they were talking about beliefs in the Middle Ages and how it was literally, the term heartbreak was literally that your heart broke. They believed that your heart physically broke from the pain.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then if you think about the tarot card, Three of Swords, which is the heartbreak card, it is three swords stabbing a heart. And it is...
Explain this to me.
Okay.
So, hysteria.
Yes, hyster, the womb.
The womb,
yes.
The uterus,
yes,
was originally thought by the ancient Egyptians 4,000 years ago to be caused by, the syndrome of hysteria and the symptoms. It's morphed over 4,000 years. But the theory was that the uterus would be wandering around the body, and that would cause all these problems. And they would use different things to try to coax the uterus back to the crotch, if you will, and they would put like nice smelling things in the crotch, and then bad smelling things in the face. But then there was another technique, because it's 4,000 years, where they would actually put like monkey dung or something in the crotch, though.
Oh,
and you're thinking, what's going on? But anyway, so if we use this, who knows what they were thinking,
right?
Because that thought actually persisted
till like yesterday, basically.
Yeah, right. That. It has to do with the uterus, and the uterus might be wandering around. But because you just imagine some ancient Egyptian physician asking people questions or hearing symptoms, and with the broken heart thing, you can imagine, because it feels that way, right? So would someone say, it feels like my uterus is moving, or it feels like something's moving, or it feels like something left that area, like what would that feel like?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I imagine you just had limited options to describe what was wrong with you, and that was as valid as anything else.
Have you ever felt like
my uterus had wandered off,
or that something's moving, or something left?
I have not felt that way. It's funny that they would believe that, because it hurts so much just where it is. Like, I think I would definitely notice if it had wandered somewhere else and was hurting that.
Well, we
much.
interpret it that way, right? Because we know that it's cramping in the uterus,
right?
But they might have interpreted it differently, right? They might have thought of it as something else, right? It's not intuitive.
Yes. Well, there were all of the humors, the phlegm and the blood and the,
So you've never felt like, when you're in a bad mood, or when things aren't going well emotionally for you, that something has left your crotch and is now up in your...
But that is an interesting way to describe hormones, which are produced. So estrogen and progesterone and testosterone in women as well are produced in the ovaries. So actually, they do want those hormones do wander around the body and cause all kinds of interesting experiences. Your actual uterus doesn't have to wander. It produces hormones that do the wandering and can cause the problems.
Let's take a break. When we get back, another question about trauma. What do you say?
Okay.
All right, back from the break. So another...
We both are burping at the same time.
Were we? It's so gross. Sometimes I will edit those out, and sometimes I won't notice them, and I'll leave in the burps, and it's disgusting. Just absolutely disgusting.
Ew, our bodies are gross.
Yeah. What is the burp trying to tell me, Rebecca?
Well, burping at least means your stomach's working.
Yeah. 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 But I don't want to hear it as a listener, and I don't want to subject the listeners to it. Anonymous patron, she says, do you have any strategies for coping with the death of my abuser, who is my dad? It has brought a huge wave of emotions to the surface, dealing with family members who have no idea of the abuse or deny the abuse. By the way, I have a fabulous therapist, and I am preoccupied attachment. So strategies coping with the death of her abuser. What do you think? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need safe people to talk about your anger or your complex feelings. It is really, really hard. Our culture really said, don't speak ill of the dead, right? But yeah, you're gonna need to have some places to be honest, and it might, death also reveals a lot. It might bring up, you might have to have some real conversations with people who are expecting you to be mourning in a certain way, and you're allowed to, or as safe as you feel, to say, yeah, I am not sad, or I have a lot of complicated emotions about this person passing.
Yeah.
It is okay for death to be incredibly complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just started doing when my mom died, I brought so many things home and they were all out. And I'm just starting to put them away.
Is that part of the grieving?
I think so. I think I've reached some kind of place where I don't need it all out. Yeah. And it's funny, there's this chair that my mom always had that I've had my entire adult life. And I'm ready to pass it on to a friend who just bought their first house. I'm like, I don't need that chair in my life anymore. So yeah, it's complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The final chapter or the final bit of my book on grief that I plan on tackling is not complicated grief, because that's a different concept, but grieving complicated relationships. Mm-hmm. It's, every situation is different. Every grief is different, but I think, grieving complicated relationships is particularly uniquely experienced, and it's made more complicated by the fact that, as Anonymous Patron says, like, people are saying, what are you talking about? He didn't abuse you. And how you're going in all different directions. On one hand, you are trying to distance yourself from the person. On the other hand, you're always fibrously connected to that person, whether you like it or not. There's also fond memories. I am going through that right now myself, and I don't want to talk about it specifically, but I will talk about it in the book, and I need to sift through my feelings around it. It's not something that's talked about enough. It seems like our culture would say that you would be happy or just not care that your abuser would die, or that you would have a movie-esque scene where you go to the grave and you cry and you get angry and you have resolution or something, and then you walk into the sunset with it over. I have found that for complicated relationships that are lost, and you can have a complicated relationship with a lot of things, like a past job or a past town, but I have found that these kinds of griefs, these kinds of losses are so weird because, like when my cat died, I don't know why that pops in my head. It's just sorrow and regret for like, I don't know, just like this sense of, well, maybe it is more complicated, but it feels like it's flowing in one direction, if that mm-hmm. makes any sense. Like when I cry about my cat dying, it feels like
there's a kind of a purity to it. Like I'm grieving something I loved. It's kind of very simple.
Yeah. Although complicated because I had to put the cat down and but it feels like it's all going in the same direction. Whereas when it's a complicated relationship, as I would feel sad about losing the person in the normal way, I also have the feeling of longing for acceptance and the feeling of anger and hurt, about a lifetime of that kind of pain.
Yeah, I mean, I currently say my mom dying is the best thing that ever happened to me, which is hard for some people to hear. And there's 10,000 things that will never get resolved.
Right.
And I hold so much of her memory. Like right now, my aunt is compiling a book of her poetry, and my aunt keeps trying to get me involved. Like, do you want to? And my aunt knows, and we've been very honest with each other.
Yeah, she's supportive.
Yes, but she just out of habit will ask, like, do you want to see where the book is? I'll say no.
Well, maybe out of respect, like.
For like, do you want to illustrate the book? No, sure don't want to illustrate the book. But, I would say another thing that is about grief is that people ask you all the time. It doesn't end. Like, people will be like, oh, I heard your mother died. That's so sad. And even people who know the whole story, like someone I love so much, her mother just passed away and she loved her mom so much. And we saw each other at a training, and I just said, I'm so sorry that you lost your mother, who was so great. And she said to me back, I know your story's really complicated. Like, she did everything right. Like, we were both allowed each other to have completely different experiences of grief.
Okay.
And I still
As opposed to her saying, I'm so sorry that your mom died.
Yeah.
Even though you know that she knows
Yeah.
that it's not that simple.
Right.
That would be bothersome to you.
Well, it would be like, but like she did everything right. And I was still like, oh, fuck, this is sad. That, like, you know, I mean, all that stuff came up of like, I thought about her relationship with her mother, which was, she was very public on Facebook with, and her mom just seemed like such a beautiful, wonderful person. And I was like, damn, I didn't have that with my mom.
Right.
Right. Like, I'm reminded all the time. I mean, Chris, that conversation that we started with, Christmas or a birthday is a classic example. Like, there's a reason that I hate that day, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, let's take a break and then quickly one email that I've been dying to ask you about. All right, back from the break. So, highest tier patron Sloan from Salem. She says...
Salem, Massachusetts, Salem, Oregon.
Doesn't say.
I have a lot of questions.
Doesn't say. Doesn't say.
Salem, Oregon, the capital of Oregon.
Or are there lots of women who were persecuted?
Salem, capital, which capital of America next to New Orleans?
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Witch, by the way?
No.
You should see the movie Witch.
Do we need to have a movie party where we watch?
Yeah. Okay, this is a long email, but I've been dying to...
All right.
Recently, I was on a walk with my boyfriend, and I went into cardiac arrest.
Oh, Jesus.
And I collapsed on the sidewalk. I was very lucky because paramedics were moments away, but the hospital told my boyfriend and my family that I had 3 days to turn around or they would have to start considering other outcomes, quote unquote, like pulling the plug. Everyone was shocked as to how a 26-year-old could go into cardiac arrest with no prior symptoms. After 2 weeks of a medically induced coma, I was conscious and starting to recover. The cause of the cardiac arrest was an overdose. The medication that I had been taking in copious amounts had caused my heart to stop and my liver to fail. To be clear, this is an addiction right going on. I was hiding my struggle with addiction from my boyfriend before going to the hospital. And anytime he asked, I would change the subject or just lie. Hindsight being 2020, I wish more than anything I could go back in time and communicate to him how badly I was struggling and that I desperately needed help. But I was so ashamed and embarrassed, and therefore I decided to deal with things on my own. I feel so overwhelmed with guilt from all the trauma I put him through because of the cardiac arrest. I really can't imagine how horrific the experience must have been for him. He slept curled up on a small bench in the lobby for a week. He read to me while I was in a coma, and he held my hand the entire time. I'm really struggling to forgive myself. And now his trust for me is understandably gone. We are trying to work on rebuilding. I have never had a deeper love for anyone the way I do for him. And I want us to rebuild, and I want us to make it as a couple. My questions are, number one, how do you suggest we start to rebuild trust after I forced him to go through something so traumatic? Rebecca.
Oh, my God. Well, you didn't force him to go through anything. He chose to go through it. Addiction is part of the human experience. It has been from the beginning of time. Relationships can rebuild trust again. You guys are you guys in family? Are you guys in couples counseling? My God. So there's several things here going on. There's your addiction, which needs to be addressed. Are you doing an abstinence model? Are you doing a harm reduction model? There's a lot to figure out there. Do you have long-term health impacts of what you just went through? Like some people who've had that intensive a reaction are told by their doctors, you have to go abstinence because a second situation like this could kill you. I don't know what the substance is. I just want to say that I picked up Narcan at Bumbershoot and was taught how to use it there. So, we live in a harm reduction state and not every place is like that. So there's a way I was trained to talk about addiction that is not. Most places in America are an abstinence-based model.
Right.
So there's that. There's your addiction, which needs to be addressed first. Or not first, but is a huge player in this. And then there is your partnership. Obviously, so he should probably be in Al-Anon. to sort out his experience of being partners with someone who has chemical addiction issues, or some other model where it is safe to talk about his experience. Obviously, he loves you very much, or there was a love there. And then there was this third player, the addiction, which caused this great rift in your relationship. Mm-hmm. I also want to say, if it doesn't work out, you will love again. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a lot going on here. You've also had a near-death, or it sounds like an actual death experience, mm-hmm. which changes people. Mm-hmm. And so you may be more different than you realize. He's also witnessed a near-death or death experience, which is also going to change mm-hmm. him.
Yeah. I don't know about you, Rebecca, but I hear in the email an over-blaming of the self. Mm-hmm. There should be a little bit of this rationally of like, oh my God, I can't believe I put him through that. But I'm guessing your husband is, if he read this email, he'd be like, well, yeah, but you almost died. Mm-hmm. You're the one that went through something, like, okay, for sure, care about me. And yeah, lying to me, that wasn't good. And it was rough to be with you as we worried that you might die. It was horrible, but you almost died. The only reason why I care is because I was worried about you. So
and
I wonder.
There's two things going on here. Like, is the shame that she almost died and was in the hospital really shame about, I'm sorry, anonymous patron, we are not anonymous, high tier patron. We are using you as Sloan from Salem. We are using you as an example. But oftentimes when we have a long history of something shameful, right? I think some of her blaming of the self is the long history of hiding the addiction all of that time.
Right. Yeah. Something was driving that shame and addiction anyway.
Yeah. And he's noticing, right? He's saying like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, nothing.
Right. Right.
And then he's doubting himself. Wait, I see this and I see that. Something is up.
Yeah. What I find is that people that have been mistreated verbally and emotionally, and they internalize that voice, they'll find any excuse, even when it doesn't make sense, to beat themselves up. And it kind of sounds like that. But the only thing that I'll say is, in addition, is that the key to building trust is that you want him to know that you're not essentially a liar, mm-hmm. but that you had, although problematic reasons, but reasons as to why you would obscure your drug use.
And people do this all of the time. Like, one of my favorite people who's an addict in recovery, when they describe the lengths that they went to hide their addiction. Right. And they also had a live-in partner who didn't know. Right.
So having him understand that would maybe help with trust, because it'd be tempting without knowing that, which most people don't, to just think you're just a liar in general. Mm-hmm. But you're not a liar in general. You just had a tremendous need, and that's what it is. You didn't wake up in the morning and say like, ha ha ha, I'm going to lie to my husband because I like to use drugs. You're using drugs because you're self-medicating a trauma in all likelihood, and there was no other path forward, and you eventually became addicted.
Right, and addiction to a substance is more powerful. Yeah. It is, like, I think of, oh my God, one of the greatest actors of our time that died from a heroin addiction.
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I'm thinking of Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah. Was quite honest that his addiction was more powerful than his wife or his children, or he just wanted to take that drug.
Right. And our puritanical interpretation of that is,
you're weak.
Yeah, or you're just a bad person.
Or you're lazy. Yeah. Right. And it's not like this substance is highly addictive and has changed your nervous system to be most concerned with getting that drug, right? Everything else can fall to the wayside.
Right. And it orients not just urge, but your emotions, the meaning of your life. It it doesn't rewire just like making you feel motivated to do that thing. It rewires your brain so that the things that you look at that compete with the use will be seen as a bad thing. You know what I mean? And other things that usually make you feel pleasure will be no longer pleasurable. So it's all encompassing. So if he understands that, and Al-Anon can help, but also just education, whatever recovery program you're in, they usually have family member activities or, groups, the models that I've been a part of.
And I would say to her, as hard as it is, let your husband speak from his own experience and try and listen.
Yeah.
Like that's probably the most healing thing that you can do. And, if you're in the defensive posture of like, oh my God, I didn't mean to, let him say his piece and listen.
Yeah. And it's in all likelihood that although this moment of almost dying is very noticeable and lets the cat out of the bag, the overall recovery, emotionally, trauma, addiction, whatever issues he has will come to the fore and probably have. You're looking at 25 years of exploration and emotion and recovery and growth and difficulty and glory. Like, there's not like an easy answer to this.
Right. It is a lifetime path to step off of that story and, figure out I have so many clients that have active substance use and they go in and out of being able to stop. And, there are so many triggers and talk about body-based memory, right? There's...
What do you see people using?
Well, I work a lot with women, so there's a lot of alcohol use.
Okay.
A lot. And then there's a lot of pot.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I live in Seattle.
That's what I said. I was just curious if your clients were using other things.
Or the best quote from my kiddo in all of this is, because we live in Seattle and there's a lot of microdosing, and Eli said the most hysterical thing, when is microdosing just dosing? It's like that in Seattle is often a question. When are you just
using a drug?
Right. When are you just using a drug often? And when are you having a spiritual experience? And when is it for daily maintenance? But we live in an interesting state. And so these conversations come up.
Yeah. I'm microdosing on alcohol every night with a bottle and a half of wine. That's my microdosing. Yeah.
So shame. As I go through my sex therapy training, we spend so much time talking about shame. It is amazing. And, shame is a huge part of substance use addiction. Trying not to feel shame, trying to hide shame, and...
having been shamed as a child.
Yeah. And, dear listener from Salem, you're going to have to look at your shame, and it's going to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But let us know.
Yeah.
Highest tier patron Sloan from Salem. Primarily tell us which fucking Salem are you from?
And Sloan from Salem, you've had a really unique experience that for all of my friends who've had near-death experiences, they spend the rest of their life processing what happened. Like it is, it's life-changing. You've had an experience that not a lot of people have had. You've sat on the edge between life and death. And I just, just honor that in itself is a whole thing. And you came back. That's no joke.
You just inspired me to write about another thing in my grief book.
Near-death experiences?
Yeah.
It's one of my dearest friends.
Because I wouldn't have thought of that as an element. I mean, I wouldn't have thought about that as an element of grief.
If you need to interview someone, one of my dearest friends is, as we get to know each other, I'm learning more and more about her near-death experience, and coming back from that, and also you look at the rest of the world and you're like, that's not a big deal. I made it through. I was sitting at the gates of death and I came back.
Mm-hmm. Or the loss of the trust of not dying. you know?
Yeah. Are you watching Chaos with Jeff Goldblum?
Mm-hmm.
So it's this great show. I am Greek myth obsessed. And so what they do is imagine the modern world as if there is only the Greek gods and goddesses. Christianity and all other world religions don't really exist. Mm-hmm. And the Greek gods are out and about causing complete havoc. Jeff Goldblum plays Zeus. He is so amazing and awful and egotistical, and all of the gods and goddesses have their own personas. But you spend a lot of time in Hades with folks who have died and aren't able to cross over and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with Greek myths too. I've always been.
You would love this show. We should do a whole podcast on this show because the way that the Greek world folds into the Greek myth world, I should say, there's an active Greek world. The way that the Greek gods and goddesses fold into modern culture is fascinating.
Interesting.
And puts a whole new spin on.
And it has Jeff Goldblum in it, so what are you going to do?
Yeah, and he's fathered like 1,000 children. There's this one scene where he's trying to get any of his kids to call him back, and like none of them will. There's just like there's like hundreds of calls because he has so many kids.
Yeah, Hercules. Some would say Alexander the Great. At least Alexander's mother, Olympias, said that.
Oh, she said that she was impregnated by Zeus?
Mm-hmm. Or at least that's what the historians back then said that the sources said. So,
yeah. Also, Poseidon plays like this very mischievous and
release the Kraken.
He's very different than that. Zeus's current wife, Hera, is very awful and fun to watch. She impersonates Zeus with one of Zeus's lovers. I mean, is
Aphrodite a influencer?
That's really funny. We haven't met her yet.
Oh,
but so the way they deal with things is very, very clever. Bravo, Chaos people.
Well, bravo, and let's call that an episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
it's really hectic out there. So we'd like you to stick around and be healthy and safe. We'd like you to vote. We'd like you to take care of each other and be kind to each other and be kind to yourself. And the person most worthy of your love is you.